One.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to this week's Writers Chat. We're glad you're with us, either here live in the chat or if you're watching the replay. We know a lot of you do watch the replay, so we're glad you are with us today. This is the place where we talk about all things writing for writers and by writers. I think that makes it very real and fun. We'll hopefully have some fun today. So my name's Jean Wise. I'm one of your co-hosts, and I'm joined today by Johnny Alexander. Wave, Johnny, there's that there. And Victoria Duerstock, and we are got a neat topic today. We're talking about the writer as speaker, and because I find that people are either one or the other, and they're not sure about blending. And then, as we said just before we went on the recording, often that's part of the platform anymore is to have both. So we're going to talk a little bit about it. What we thought we would do is each of us share a little bit of our journey as we became speakers, and then we're going to spend a lot of time on the tips, maybe something that we've learned in this journey. And then we especially wanted Vicki back because she, a couple weeks ago, shared some voice tips that I didn't realize before. So she's got all sorts of things she's going to share with us today. So we do want to spend some time. So hopefully this will be a inspirational and a practical topic for everybody and stuff. And I may mute occasionally because I have workers here, so I apologize if I mute, but I'll hop on quite a bit. I hope they're way out front, so hopefully you can't hear them on that way. Johnny, why don't you start a little bit about your journey, how you became a speaker, or were you a writer first or a speaker, or what happened?
You know, it's just one of those crazy things because I probably wanted to be a writer forever, but I also really enjoyed speaking, even though I'm kind of quite an introvert. I like being in front of people and talking. So I had some opportunities to speak in my much younger days, but I never really pursued that as a ministry. The kids' school, I was still going to school until I was pregnant for my third child, and just all those kinds of things. So then writing, when finally God opened all those doors and closed some other doors, it was writing and writing fiction that really caught my heart, and I was able to get into that and start doing that. But then, full circle, that has opened doors to being able to speak about writing at writers' conferences. And I love being able to do that because it's so energizing, just like writers chat, right? I mean, Tuesdays, by the time we're done, it's like, woohoo, this is just great. And I also, as most of you know, I interview inspirational authors for a website, Novelists Unwind. And it's the same thing. After I get done talking and we say goodbye, to the person that I'm interviewing, there's still just that adrenaline rush just from having talked about our writing journeys and that person's books and stories and so forth. So I think, I don't want to go on and on too long, but I was going to say this. When you're building a platform as a nonfiction author, you're usually talking, we've talked about this before, you're talking about what you're writing about. And so, if you're writing about parenting, you're talking about parenting. If you're writing about how to determine God's will for your life, that's what you're going around speaking about too. And with fiction, it's hard. There's lots of times it's hard to know what to blog about. It's hard to know what your website's about. And so it can also be difficult to form a speaking ministry around that unless your fiction is pretty focused on a particular topic. And I don't think well, it's not, because I write in different genres. So I love the opportunity to speak to writers, about writers, encourage new writers to talk about writing. And that sort of seems to be where God has led me. It's not where I thought I would be when I was in my 20s and really thinking about it. I wanted to, to encourage women. I wanted to be a motivational speaker. That was sort of more my dream thoughts. But I also didn't feel like I had enough to offer, and I felt like my family circumstances didn't make me credible. That was just kind of a real vulnerable moment there, but true. Yeah. And I think sort of squished that dream a little bit.
Yeah. So it sounds like you were a writer first, but it sounds like you had a lot of hints of being a speaker early on too, didn't you?
Yeah, I did, and I taught women's Sunday school class years and years and years and years. And that was sort of, allowed me to have that,
Yeah.
that encouragement and that kind of thing. And I just loved it. I was always energized every Sunday morning because I could do that. And then led women's Bible studies too, and did that on a regular basis for several years. So that was sort of how I
kind of eased in.
And it gives you that experience too. I mean, just like being on Writer's Chat has kind of given us all some, I feel more comfortable in front of a camera now because of Writer's Chat, which is really, really good. Yeah.
Yeah. And Donna commented in the chat. I think she commented that she never wanted to be a speaker or writer, but God had other plans. And I think, Melissa just said God does that. I agree, because it's sort of my story too. And I'm anxious to hear Vicky's story, that I would have never guessed X number of years ago, and it's a bigger X than what I like to admit sometimes, but I would have never guessed that long ago that it would have been this route we would have gone, and on that. That's crazy. Vicki, what's kind of your story? Writing, speaking first, or how'd they emerge?
Well, my story is a little unusual. I don't want to tell everything today, but my story revolves around the fact that I've played the piano for a long period of my life. I was an only child, so I either read books or I practiced the piano. I love it. And so there you have my love of reading and then my love of music. And so you can't major in reading in college, so I decided to major in music. I know. If I could have, I would have, because that would have been the perfect career for me. It would have been. But I did. I majored in piano and performance in particular, because I've always enjoyed, as nerve-wracking as it is, getting up in front of people and doing what I have worked so hard to prepare for. So recitals were always the big thing and so exciting to get to. So the performance, whether that's standing in front of people to talk to them or speak to them or teach, or that moment is what, that adrenaline, and I love to get up there and do that. But then I need to go back and I need to recharge quietly in a dark room, by myself.
Yes. You're an introvert then. Vicki, are you an introvert too?
Yeah, I am.
Yeah, all three of us are introverts.
We are.
God's thrusting us into speaking. Yeah.
My husband argues with me all the time. He's like, no, you're an extrovert. You talk to people. I'm like, no. Like, I enjoy that, but then I need a cutoff. I need a time where I can just go and be quiet.
Just leave me alone for a while.
So I majored in music. I got my master's degree in music education, and then I've taught piano and voice lessons for years and years and years. Here in the North Mississippi area, drama and theater is really big. And so a lot of my voice students have been coming in getting ready for auditions. And so I coach them through that and proper techniques so they can sing for a long time. So that was something I did all the way up until 2015. And then the Lord just kind of started maneuvering my heart in a different direction. And I had always said I would write one day, but I thought it would be once the kids are out of the house and I wasn't homeschooling anymore and doing all those other things. So in that process, He has really brought me into that time now where writing and speaking, I get to speak at writers' conferences and tour stops about the things I've learned, marketing and social media wise, which again, I had no idea I was going to need to know when I started writing.
Surprise.
I just wanted to write a book.
Isn't that the truth? Yes, just let me write. Sit in my little world and write.
Yeah. Well, it sure sounds like we've got a God of surprises, isn't it? on that. And I'll quickly share my story, because this whole speaking thing was never my thing. I was going to go into English and go to writing and end up in nursing for a whole other reason. But I can remember in high school, I didn't want to take speech or any of this. In college, we were required to take a speech class. That was the dreaded, and I had it was not on my radar at all to do anything in the area of speaking. And we were in our early 20s, newly married in a little town called Bucyrus, Ohio, Bucyrus.
Yeah, I know where that is.
Yeah, Bucyrus. And my husband joined a young men's group called the JCs. I don't even know if they're still around. And of course, that was the time when the women had the group, the JCettes, so that's when they weren't words. But anyway, and the JCettes, about my second, third year in, I was elected president. So, you know how you try to be a leader and all this? Well, didn't the JCETs, the Ohio JCETs, decided to have a speaking contest. So I'm sitting there talking to our little people locally, and I said, come on, we need to send some reps to the district. Who wants to do this? You know, trying to delegate, trying to recruit someone else. And there was one other girl said, well, I'll do it if you do it. And I thought, I am not wanting to do a speak. Did not want to do this. So she and I went to the district. I won district.
Wow.
So then I had to go to the regional, and I won regional. And then I had to go to state. I won state. And then I had a chance to go to national, and unfortunately that was the time when my mom was dying, passing away. So I had to take care of that. So I could not go to national. And the lady that came in second went, and she won. So I always kind of thought, I might have won, yeah. But anyway,
I've known you for 11 years, and I have never heard this story.
Never heard that story. It's true, and I was like what Vicki said. It was doing that.
Oh wow!
That energy you do get from the performance side that you draw, just opened it up, and at that point, I saw myself as more of a speaker. But it was after a series and some confidence and kind of stepping out, trying it, you know, I kind of found that, you know, and then I became more of a speaker for a while and less of a writer. Then it switched back to writing, and now it's actually kind of that blend of both. But it's a god of surprises. You never know the opportunities that are coming along. You know.
I think you have to be willing to open and walk through open doors. Like whenever they're open to you, you have to be willing to say yes, even if you don't have it 100% figured out just yet. You just take that next step.
Yeah. I agree with Vicki. We had to take speech in college as well, and our teacher told us. And now remember this, well, you don't remember because you don't know, but this was a very tiny Bible college, and there were like 9 people in the freshman class, maybe 10. So we were all in all the same classes together. But our professor said to this class, which was mostly guys who were going to be ministers, anytime you're asked to speak, say yes. And like that is the one thing I remember from that class. So anytime, even in those early days when I wasn't, you know, a young mom, not really knowing what I was going to do, mainly working to help, you know, family and all that kind of stuff, it's like if someone asks you, say yes. So when someone asks, say yes. And I still kind of do that even with the writing projects. Like if they just kind of fall in my lap, unless I have a really good reason to say no, I say yes.
Yeah. It's hard. Yeah. Every time you have to speak. And I like Rachel said in the chat, do it scared. Yeah. I won't talk. I bet Vicki's got some tips how we can handle when we're a little scared. We'll get to those in just a minute too. And Johnny, maybe go back a little bit. Leslie asked if you write fiction, there's a different focus in each of your stories. How do you tie them together with speaking? Or you just speak on your current topic? Like you gave some hints about that. Do you want to explore that a little bit?
Well, you know, I've attended marketing seminars and different things where they say, like, if in your books the characters are involved, like in a hobby such as scrapbooking or quilting or gardening or something like that, or you know, recipes. That's popular. You could blog or speak about those kinds of things. My characters, I don't do those kinds of things, so my characters tend to not do those kinds of things either. I mean, I sort of have to force them sometimes into those roles. But the theme that sort of does go through my books, most of them, not all of them, because I do write continuity series too, and I don't really make up those characters. They're given to me, so that's kind of a different ballgame. But there's a sense in most of my stories that our present is very much influenced by decisions made in the past, maybe not even by us, maybe by our grandparents or our parents. And that affects us, but we don't have to let the past
probably
us. And so those are sort of the themes and that whole thing about we've got
it. Here you go.
Thank you.
I got it.
We've got and about heritage and family legacy, even in my contemporaries, there's a very strong sense of history in that. So I haven't developed topics to speak about on that. My speaking since I've been published has almost always been about writing. But it is, it's something. I was thinking about this morning and last night, that maybe that is a message that I have that I could get out there. I think it's, I think especially the older you get, you just see a lot of things you wish you'd done differently. But again, you have a choice about what your tomorrow is going to be, and just because things in the past didn't work out that well, that doesn't have to influence you, or paralyze you.
Developing this whole kind of extra career path of speaking about writing is important, because there's always people out there that the wannabes that really want to learn, and they need to listen and learn. So I think that's great. And I love the idea, though, of finding themes in your work and expanding that into a topic on that. I think that makes a big difference. Now, Janice has mentioned Toastmasters. Have either of you done anything local with a local group? I know Toastmasters is in my area too, and on that. Does either of you two do anything like that with Toastmasters? I never did.
No.
I wanted to, but anytime I looked into doing it, whatever period of my life that was, it just didn't mesh, meeting times and stuff like that. I understand that it's a great thing to do. I think it would be a good thing to do. Actually, what I want to do now, and I'm having a little bit of trouble reading the comments with my eyes.
Okay, I'll watch them.
But I saw the word drama and different things in there, different places. Really, what I would like to do, I have no acting ability whatsoever, but I want to take an acting class and see how that develops as far as developing characters, and then also perhaps, I just lost my train of thought. I guess just part of that, just coming out of myself, just sort of, again, not letting the past define you, where, you sometimes because of things I have felt a little squished and a little, whatever, and just wanting to step out and.
Yeah. Vicki, you got any pointers on that when it comes to performance?
I was like itching to talk. So
yes, do it. I knew you were.
Yay!
Yay! Take it away.
No, I think acting class is a great idea, because you do, somebody mentioned it earlier in the chat, you do get lines to learn, so it's a little bit different than having to kind of speak extemporaneously and come up with your own material. And you are playing a character, which I think does wonders for our confidence many times. And it's what I tell my kids going out for auditions a lot. I would always tell them, be a superhero. And what superhero are you going to be? What are you wearing under your shirt? Who are you today? And go in with that confidence. You're playing a character. They're not judging you. They're judging your role. And so it's kind of an interesting exercise to try to get you kind of out of your skin, out of your element, and to be able to speak with confidence without feeling very self-conscious that they're looking at you. So I love that. I think the acting is great.
And I've got to add, since you talked about confidence and roles and superheroes, you guys, we may have mentioned that on here, Writer's Chat, but it's been a while. You guys, the research on the Superwoman, Wonder Woman pose. Wonder Woman pose. We got to go through it. Well, do you know this, Vicki?
I don't. I missed
scientifically researched.
Bethany knows this. She can talk about it.
I just think it is great. They say before you go into any situation where you need more confidence, like it could be even a job interview, it could be your work evaluation, it could be go to meeting your boss for a pay raise, or it could be a speaking event. You do the Wonder Woman pose for 2 minutes. Before you go in the stall in the bathroom. Now I'm going to change my camera here. Here we go. Stand up. I'm going to stand back. You go like this. You look up. You might even go pointing like John Depp. No. But you point up. You look up and you hold it and you stand like Wonder Woman. 2 minutes. They've actually documented it. Change your brain and gets the endorphins going, and you ooze confidence like you never did before. I have taught that in a one talk I did to cancer survivors, and I had them all stand up, and everybody, it was just brought life to the whole room. So remember the Wonder Woman stance, which is sort of what, Vicki, kind of what you were saying, you know?
Exactly. Yes. No, I mean, it's true. Even if you're going to meet with an editor, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like we go to conferences and we want to meet with agents and editors, and I need the bangles too, you know, like
Right.
I could imagine it all, you know, in my mind before I sit down. Yes, because it does. What we tell ourselves in our mind affects everything else we do. And that happens with speaking as well. And so when we're in our head and we're thinking all these negative things, then that definitely affects how we portray ourselves. And if we're trying to be a speaker and speak with authority, then we definitely have to have that confidence that's not necessarily in ourselves, because especially if we're speaking, if we're a person of faith and we're speaking to not inspirational crowd, but maybe it's a ministry and we're trying to encourage women, or we're trying to do something that way, then that confidence needs to come through as an authority that the Lord's given us. And we need to stand there confidently. Like, this is something he's given us to say, and not to be little shrinking little violets off in the corner that this is kind of what I think, or this is what I want to tell you.
Watch what you focus on. If you focus on being nervous and I'm afraid I'm going to fail, that's what you're going to focus on. But if you focus on, I'm going to glorify God with this message, or I want this for God, not me, and your focus is more that way, that just helps you get in a little bit better. So
I'll get back to the Wonder Woman thing just a minute, not to dwell on too much, but men tend to do this. They're kind of big and they spread out, and women do not. So this is why I think it's really important and we have mostly women on here today, maybe all. We kind of sit, like if you're sitting, like if you're waiting for your turn to be called for a job interview, the man's going to be sitting there, how he does, and the women are going to be sitting very primly, probably. You might have in your lap, or you're going to have your hands in your purse, and all. And that's why if you go to the restroom, like Jenny said, and do this, but just do it. Like, do it now when we can't see you, or do it after Writer's Chat. But even just a little bit, me sitting in my chair as I was doing that, you just feel it in your body. I mean, like, oh, wow, wow. So maybe just do that every day. I don't know.
Make that part of our morning ritual.
Yeah.
But that somebody made the comment about the breathing. It gets you breathing too. And I bet, Vicki, do you have some hints on breathing? And I do want to get to that. But I think the breathing, but the pose, the posture, all that leads to confidence. But what fascinates me is I always get hung up on reading all these actual research that they could see the changes in MRIs in our brains. I mean, this isn't just mumbo jumbo. It actually is doing something, makes us feel good. So is there some other breathing tips that you might tell us, Vicki?
Absolutely. I've got several.
Good. Great.
I think one thing to remember that, when you're speaking, if you get tired, like at the end of a talk, or if you have to teach for a long period of time, it just means that your voice is a little bit weak. And what we're born with isn't necessarily what you have to keep. There's a lot of things that you can do to improve not only your breath support, but also your sound, your pitch, your diction. There's all kinds of things that you can do to improve your speaking ability. You're not just born with something and that's what you've got to work with. Or if you've had damage of some kind, you can still work with that and still improve it. So I think that that's the exciting part of it, because our throats are made up of muscles, and there's 325 different pitches that we can make from our throat, which is astounding, right? And so we don't use all of them all the time, but we can definitely make improvements. And so breathing is just one portion of it. But a lot of times we think, well, we're breathing, we're alive, we must be doing it right. But the breathing really has to come from the right place. And what's difficult, especially if you're trying to teach a vocal lesson or try to speak to people about how to breathe and how to speak better, the hard part is that a lot of that happens internally. You can't show somebody how that happens. If you're trying to teach something else, you can show someone physically how that's occurring. But when you're teaching something that's occurring internally, it's really hard to demonstrate, the right way to do it. So they've created some different exercises and different things that you can use to help you get things in the right place. So
Wow.
The very first thing they always make you do if you take a voice lesson or if you're going to work with a speaking coach, is they usually make you lay down on the floor.
Really?
Yes, which can be kind of intimidating if you're in a group.
Yeah.
Lay down on the floor. But you're going to lay down on the floor. And the reason is because you want to feel right where that breath is coming from. Many of us breathe very shallow. And so we breathe from our upper chest. And so this is what moves whenever we're breathing. And this is not the right area. You want to breathe from the diaphragm, which is down, in general, in your belly area. And so when you're breathing, your belly should come out. So when I breathe in, that belly needs to come out. And when I breathe out, the belly should come in. And so the best way to do that is when you're laying on the floor, because you can't breathe incorrectly that way. Your belly's going to go out. So they'll put a book on your belly, while you're laying down. And if you push your book up and down, then you've got it in the right place. I'd like to know how many people at home are like laying on the floor right now trying to.
I know. We've got it. Everyone's got to try this. Vicki, since you've done this, is this how you normally breathe now? I mean, is it your practice to breathe correctly? Is that
Yes.
a good sentence?
Yes, and here's why. Because I had asthma growing up, right? So I always had trouble with breathing. I have one lung that doesn't operate at full capacity, and so it was a hindrance for me to be able to breathe correctly. So if I'm going to sing and if I'm going to help others sing, then I have to learn how to breathe correctly. And the more you do it, the more it becomes second nature, which is one of the reasons that you want to practice your technique a little bit every day, so that when you get up in front of people and you do have some nerves and things going on, you do it the right way anyway, because that's just your habit. So yes, breathing. Breathing from the diaphragm. If you just practice that a little bit at a time, it does become much more natural, and you'll have a lot more power. You can project and be able to actually speak if your microphone goes out, which, as we know,
happens. It does. And that's got to help your confidence, just knowing that your voice is working the way it should too.
Absolutely. And if you're breathing well, then you're moving that air back and forth, which is helping your blood flow, which is also, breathing is a huge thing for getting rid of anxiety and tension out of your body. Mm-hmm. If your body's tense, your voice is going to sound tense. It can sound a little gravelly. It's not very pleasant. So there's a lot of really good things that happen for your body if you're just breathing correctly. So I know I talked about the straw.
Tell us about the straw.
Tell us the straw in case somebody wasn't here a couple weeks ago.
I love to use straw exercises. This is not new to me. If you research on the internet, you'll see it's been around for a really long time. The reason the straw is useful is this long term called semioccluded vocal tract. And all that means is you're reducing the amount of space where the air can move back and forth, right? And so what happens is your vocal cords and flaps and folds, whichever term you want to use, are going to get stronger because you're using the same amount of pressure that you would if you didn't have it semioccluded or closed. You would use the same amount of pressure. So for instance, one of the first exercises you'll do when you're using a straw is just to blow bubbles in your water.
Oh, what fun! Yay! My mama used to tell me that the more bubbles your milk had, the blonder your hair would be. Proof.
I love it.
Okay.
It's not out of a box. No.
Right.
Bubbles.
Okay, so the bubbles are important, not because you're blowing bubbles in water, but because you're learning to control the intensity of the breath that you're pushing out. And so if you blow in and you have these bubbles blowing out really fast, then you're pushing too hard. If you don't have any bubbles, then you're not pushing enough. So it teaches you just that proper balance in that tight space. So it's a really, really good exercise. Just don't have your water filled all the way up.
I love it. Good.
So that's the first one that you can do, and then you can drink a little water afterwards to stay hydrated. So the next thing that you can do with a straw is to make like siren sounds. And the reason this one's important is because you're, again, trying to focus the energy of your breath through the front of the straw, not out the side of your mouth or out your nose. So you're trying to get it in the right place. This helps us with what we call that mask resonance, where we get the sound from the front of our face rather than in the back of our throat. If you've ever heard somebody talk like this and it's all in the back of their throat, they're really hard to understand. Yeah. So you want to get the sound at the front of your face, and that's what makes things actually sound brighter and a little bit prettier. So one of the things you can do is start really, really low. This is gonna be fun to have on video.
Oh, waiting for this. There we go, folks.
I like doing this in the studio when no one's recording. So all right, so you can do that for a long time.
My husband's
1 or 2 minutes.
strange noises coming out of my office. Now this is so really tough.
1 or 2 minutes, right? Just, it's going to make your lips vibrate really, really good.
Okay.
And it's going to help it tingle kind of right here. But when you're done, your sound is lighter. It's not working on your throat. It doesn't affect your throat. You can do this several times during the day. Like say you have to speak all day long. If you start to feel that throat kind of tire a little bit throughout the day, you can go somewhere, and this is not loud, right? I mean, I can be a lot louder, but if you're going through a straw, you could sing a song, you could warm up, you could say your whole speech. You know, you could keep talking through the straw. Nobody's going to really.
You could practice your next speech through the
Yes,
straw.
you can practice. Right, and it warms up your voice. It's going to get you right. It's going to get all that sound right here.
Right.
Which is really where you want it. You want it to almost feel like that sound is coming right out your eyes, which is very, very strange sensation, but it's not going to hurt your throat. It's not going to feel bad. And it's something that you can do. I mean, even if you're out to eat or you have a lunch break from a speaking engagement, you can grab a straw. It's a convenient thing. Sam's also sells them in bulk. And so
I always have straws in my glove box, but never for this purpose. So I'll have to.
Yeah.
It's also fun. Listen to the laughter, which would reduce our stress, I would think, you know?
It does. It feels a bit silly, and everybody thinks it's kind of funny, but it really works. And it is. It lightens the moment, especially if you have a bit of tension or a little bit of anxiety. You're doing something else that's actually helping you. You're relaxing and having a little bit of fun before you get started. My daughter has to warm up sometimes for praise band rehearsals, and she doesn't always want to warm up in front of everybody. And so I'm always like, well, use a straw. You know, nobody's going to really hear what's going on. You know, they're just going to hear this moaning sound. But it's really good. And it gets the lips vibrating, which is really useful when it's time to be very clear with your diction, because that's the other thing is our tongue can be tense and our lips can be tense, and that affects our enunciation.
Wow, those are great, great tips. I want to interject a question right now because some of you may have seen this on Facebook. Bethany was talking, I believe, at Blue Ridge, and her voice started to give out, or she started having a scratchy throat voice. And a couple people, do you have some suggestions when that happens, especially when change of weather that's going along in a lot of our areas of the country right now is often when times we get more raspy and all that. Do you have any ideas for that?
Oh, sure. There's a lot of things that we do that, yes, I've got all kinds of ideas. How long do we have today?
Let's see, we got some more time. Throw some stuff out.
No, I mean, one of the things that we don't always think about as speakers is what we consume and how it affects our voice. And so before allergy season and flu season and all that stuff even affects us, we want to be sure that we're hydrating really well. I mean, drinking water is incredibly important, and avoiding carbonation and caffeine and acid is hugely important for the quality of your voice. I know. Even tea, as much as that's helpful, you want to make sure it's decaffeinated, because that caffeine affects that quiver in our voice sometimes too, right? Because we get that extra adrenaline rush, we can get a little bit more of that quiver in the voice, and sometimes that quiver can be mistaken for nerves, when in reality we've just had a little too much caffeine.
No. What about eating? You know, because sometimes we're the after dinner speakers, and I have learned not to eat that much. I'm the after dinner speaker, but is there certain foods or anything that you're aware of that affect that?
Absolutely. Spicy foods will affect your voice, especially long term, you know, because there's acid in spicy foods. So anytime those stomach acids can come up, they will affect your throat. If you have any kind of acid reflux or anything like that, that will affect your sound. And then any dairy. Dairy products will affect because they create more phlegm and mucus in your throat. And so that actually will make things worse, especially if you have allergies or if you are fighting a cold or anything like that. So you want to avoid dairy.
Yeah. What about lemon water? Melissa's asking, because
Yeah,
that's both
I love
acidic, but it doesn't, the acid doesn't affect it as much.
Not quite the same as an acidy like orange juice or something else.
Okay.
The lemon is actually beneficial for you.
Okay, that sounds good. And
then
Janice
a saltwater
asked if
gargle.
Yeah, what? Now say it again.
Saltwater gargle.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Salt
Janice
healing.
asked that you repeat the things to avoid again. I think you said anything with basically with caffeine and
Yeah, so caffeinated drinks, carbonated drinks. Those bubbles, like you don't want to be talking and have a bubble come up, right? That would just be the worst. So no carbonation, no milk, any dairy products, no acid, so spicy foods or juices. So some juices are more acidy than others. And then just drink lots of water.
Lots of water.
Yeah.
And Jenny asked about gum. She's noticed some singers keep gum in their mouth tucked between the back of their teeth and their cheek. Do you think that's helpful at all?
I'll tell you what's better. What's better is a Ricola cough drop.
Really? Why is that?
Well, because there's certain properties in that Ricola cough drop because it's natural, but it's also, it helps loosen the throat up and cause it to not sting. But I had a teacher, a voice teacher in school. He was an opera singer, and he would always sing. He had the cough drop lodged in between his lip and his teeth.
Really?
I was always scared to do because I'm scared I'm going to spit it out. Somebody. He would lodge that in there, and he just recommended that keeping that Ricola was just the best thing. Gum, I don't know if I would do gum. I would be more prone to like start smacking it, So for me, gum's a no-no. But if you're really good at it, I suppose that would help.
Tina said she'd probably choke on it, and that's
exactly. That would be I'd be like breathing in really deep, and then I go.
We'll demonstrate the Heimlich maneuver now, folks.
I think it'd be a little distracting.
Yeah. On that. What else you got for us? Or we could do a round and each of us share some tips. We got a good 15 minutes maybe before we bring everybody back in.
Yep. I have a few more things if you don't mind.
Please do. Please do.
All right. So another thing is posture. So your posture is really important. Posture is important for breathing.
Sit up, everybody.
Posture is important for breathing, but it's also important for just being able to have that good blood flow, which we need, and the oxygen flowing through our bodies, not just through our lungs. So, remember your posture is so important. Also, posture communicates to people. If we kind of are a little hunched over, we're communicating a different message than what we want to as a speaker who knows what we're speaking about and our topic. And so we have to remember that the posture is not only beneficial for us physically, but it's a mental cue for other people, what they're going to take away from us as well.
And when you say on posture, sometimes we're up on either a big stage or a little bit of stage. Of course, sometimes you could be in the same room. And I've learned the value of sometimes moving out beyond the podium. Some people stay right next to the podium, and that divides you from your audience. And that's kind of related to posture, I think, in that way. And I've learned if I move to the side or come towards the audience, that seems to invite them into whatever I'm talking about better.
Sort of, yeah.
Yeah, on that. And I think that's really to the posture.
We just slump. I just as you were saying that, I'm just sitting here kind of casually, and it's like, okay, posture. And again, it's like, my gosh, I feel that in my spine. I feel it in my shoulders. Mm-hmm. And because we're on our computers so much, I think we get in that habit, so then we're always sort of shortened. Is that the right, you know what I mean? We're just all pressed when we need to be
compressed versus stretched.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. So, all right, I'm going to look on the head, lay on the floor with the book on my stomach, get my jaw.
Well, that's an important part of warm-ups is just even stretching exercises, which, again, we don't always think about, right? We want to just get right into the thing that we're getting ready to do. And if we would actually maybe take a few minutes to warm up, and warm-ups sometimes can be just as simple as getting some shoulder rolls, getting ready to go back, You got to go forward. You can do the neck rolls to release all that tension in your neck. All right. Those are important. Both ways. Reaching up, standing up and reaching all the way to the ceiling, and then bending over and reaching all the way to the floor. Those are so important, and kind of rolling your back up as you come back up. That's an important part of warming up, because that's going to affect, your whole body affects your throat.
Mm-hmm.
It just does, because we're breathing, we're trying to do all these different things. And so that will actually help. And one of the things about breathing, again, if you're wondering if you're breathing correctly, if you will bend over while you're standing up and let your arms dangle and your head dangle and then start to speak, you're not going to be able to speak incorrectly. You're breathe incorrectly. You're forced, because you're cut off, right? You're going to be forced from the diaphragm, right? And so you can sing that way, you can speak that way, but it's also a great way to practice, so that when you stand back up, you want to try to duplicate how that felt, so that you can do it again.
Wow. So bend over like at our waist. Is that what you meant?
Yep, but you got to dangle those arms. They have to be relaxed. The head has to dangle. Everything has to dangle. So you got to feel really, 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 really awkward.
I can just picture the blood rushing to my head, me falling on the floor.
We lost our speaker.
That's going to happen. Stand back up.
Class, class would be like boing.
These are great tips, Vicki. These are great.
I'm going to try them all as soon as we get off Writer's Chat.
Yeah, I've made myself a little list, but I'm going to go get that straw.
Right? Well, the thing is that if you did just a little bit every day, you would you'd strengthen those muscles. You'd strengthen the breathing. You'd be more aware. You can actually hold your breath. We used to do this one called the Milkshake Step for breathing, for expanding your lungs. You can actually teach your lungs to hold more air than they do naturally. So that's why runners do really well at holding more air. You can actually learn to regulate that air. But the Milkshake Step is basically you're just taking a big, long sip, and you can use the straw if you want to. You don't have to, but you can sip in.
A thick milkshake. Yeah. Ooh.
Oh, wow.
And then let it go. All right. So you're teaching your body to hold more air. But if you think of it as a milkshake, because I love chocolate milkshake, it's a nice thick sip, right? It's not like, this really quick straw. It's a nice thick sip. You're filling your lungs up. And then you're going to take those 3 more breaths in to see if you can fill up any more and hold. And then once that's easy, you go to 4. And then once that's easy, you go to 5 extra breaths. And you can just keep expanding your lung capacity.
Wow. I think that is a great tip. And I love the image of the milkshake. Tina had a good image in the chat too. She said gymnastics and kazoos, circus performers make the best speakers. I bet. Think about what they've learned. Yeah, I think she's got a great point.
Oh my gosh.
I love it. And even I've learned, because I practice centering prayer, contemplative prayer, and I practice my breathing ahead of time to kind of slow me down and enter the space with God. But your milkshake prayer is similar to some of the deep breathing I do as I enter prayer. So it makes me, I'm going to have to, God and I will have a milkshake.
Yeah. Gee, that's sweet. I think,
wow. Wouldn't that be cool? But I think you can use this more than just speaking. And I think as writers, we're now going to put a supply of straws on our desks along with colored pens and stuff like that.
And the other thing that's come out that you actually now have just created an anecdote for encouraging women in your prayer life. And if that's what you're speaking about, remember Milkshake with God,
Milkshake with God could be a whole talk. Could be a whole talk on that way. Johnny, did you have another tip or two that you wanted to share with us?
Nothing as fun as Vicki's, but just but this is something I picked up just from being observant. I now print out, I don't know that I have everything, but when I'm talking about different writing topics and asked to speak about different things, I print them out and put them in a 3-ring binder with sheet protectors. And that way I can just carry that whole notebook with me wherever I go. And it's very easy if you've got the podium, you can just kind of flip to those pages if you want those notes. And so that's really helpful. And then, keep those copies. Just a couple Saturdays ago, I was going to an American Christian Fiction Writers chapter meeting in Memphis, and the person who was going to be speaking that day sent me a text at 6:45 that morning and said, "I'm sick, I can't go, will you speak for me?"
Oh,
And
wow.
so I did not, because I was in Tennessee, did not have that little notebook with me, so it will always travel with me from now on. But I had the talk, I was able to go to my laptop and look and see, okay, what have I talked about in the past and what can I easily, pull together to talk about today. And so again, saying yes, being prepared, but it's nice just to kind of have that in a notebook that you can just carry with you. And then if you're, if somebody's on the spot and you need to step in, you've got your material.
Very good. I keep a lot of my talks in 3-ring notebooks for that, and then a lot of times I put notes in there, like who I gave that talk to and when, and because it's first of all, it's nice to look back and see, but it's like, oh, that's been 2 years since I gave that. And Johnny, you made 2 comments I want to follow up on.
Okay.
What you made a comment on the chat earlier when in response to the idea what can fiction writers speak about, develop a list of potential talks. And I find out, especially the organizers love seeing that. I will get calls like, will you come speak to our women's group? And I'll say, well, what is your theme and all that? They said, well, what do you have? Or they've gone to my website. And one of my most popular ones is what I learned about God from chocolate. Mm-hmm. And chocolate is just, everybody identifies with it, and that gives them so sometimes if you think creatively, what could I speak about? What's something fun? What's my passion on that? And then think about, could it also be the table favors or the themes or the decoration? People love that. It's almost like a ready-made idea for them, which is similar to what you had said in the chat. Come up with some ideas on that. You may not even have them all done. I've got 3 or 4 on my website on speaker topics that I've never written out.
I do too.
Follows me on it. Huh?
Yeah, I do too. I have some that I know I could speak about, but I haven't developed completely. So my one sheet has some things on it that I either have spoken about, and so I know I can do them, or there are new ones that I would love to develop, but I haven't necessarily invested the time into that just yet till somebody says they need it.
Yeah. And Leslie says your speeches don't have to relate to your current book at all.
They don't really have to. I mean, unless someone's asking you to come and talk about that book specifically, no. And I would try to, like, if you're pushing a certain book, I would try to somehow relate it, maybe like an anecdote or even just a little scene or something so that you can mention it. But if they're wanting to hear you speak, they're wanting you to speak for something that's going to benefit them. Remember, it's the same thing. What's in it for me? It's not, okay? It's not what's in it for us. It's what's in it for our audience. And having written a book just gives you credibility. A lot of people are in awe of that you've done it. I think we sort of get jaded about that because we know so many people who've done it, so we forget that, people really, oh, wow, you wrote a book. Wow, you were special. And so, just use that. But yeah, whatever, God lays on your heart to write or to speak about, I think you can do that. And then just, kind of.
And that was a tip I was going to share that I've learned, because I have trouble mentioning my books from the stage. It's that kind of that, I hate the selly part. By the way, I've written a new book, da-da-da-da-da. I hate that. And does it fit or not fit? And I've learned, they always introduce you. So I will say to whoever the person is, I'm going to send you a short bio that you could use if you want to in the introduction. And then I have a chance to form the bio that relates to, say, my chocolate talk or to whatever the other talk I'm giving, or whatever it be, and puts a little humor. And then they read. She writes a blog that's called da-da-da-da-da, and her newest book is such and such. It's available on Amazon. They read it. And then people a lot of times will come up afterwards. So that's a tip I've learned. So I'm a little sometimes proactive in offering them. They're
going to be interested in your book because they came to hear you speak, and so no matter what you're talking about, they're going to be interested.
You can always relate it and hook it. Johnny, you said something too that I wanted to go back and because I think it's a tip sometime. You talked about a podium. not all places will be prepared for the speaker.
No,
And so that was another tip that I had, is get there a little early and scope the place out. Ask, tell them, be open, tell them what you need. A lot of times I'll say, I need a podium or at least a music stand there that I can lay my notes on, find out what they're going to do microphone-wise. You know, I went to a place a couple weeks ago and they had a wireless mic, and I'm used to the wireless mic now because of church, but it hooked around my ear, totally different from what I was used to. And boy, I had to kind of mess with it for a while to get it to fit real right, which would have kept bothering me if I hadn't adjusted it early. So, you know, have that, work with that kind of, think through those details ahead of time. And
especially if you're being, you know, if you're not prepared to speak, because like really, I try to have my talk in my head so that I don't have to look at notes very much. But you know, if you haven't done it for for a bit, and you're just doing it at the last minute, you can't always get that all back in your head. So it is nice to have just something, a stand. And I'm like Jeannie, I kind of like not to be behind the podium. So, but if it's there, you can sort of back up, look, and then go forward.
Or if you have a quote or a certain fact or something, you look at that, and that's a good time. Then you know what your next thing's going to be. Yeah, I kind of do it more from.
And here's just a little thing that popped in my head because I thought of PowerPoint, because sometimes that can be a good thing. But Bethany actually told me this a couple of years ago, that if the PowerPoint is what makes your speech noteworthy, you're doing it wrong, because there are people come to see you, not your PowerPoint. Yeah. And I was stressing over not having a PowerPoint, and she was like, well, really, that sometimes that's a good thing not to have that. So don't feel like you need something like that. People come to hear you. It can be good. It can be fun to have that. It can kind of keep you on track. Patricia Bradley and I speak at the Mid-South Christian Writers Conference every year together. We do a workshop on different topics. We always do PowerPoint because it does, just keeps us focused in where we're going. But, use it sparingly. Don't put your whole speech on the
speech on it, and be prepared if it doesn't work.
Exactly. I've had that happen.
Flexibility.
Yeah.
I think you have to have a sense of flexibility too. Whether the technology doesn't work. I mean, I've played the piano at places where certain keys don't even work. I mean, there's just all kinds of things that when you are up in front of people that are going to happen, that your notes can fly on the floor when the air conditioning comes on.
Yeah, I always put page numbers on them, by the way.
So that stuff can happen, and you can't let that throw you off. But the other thing that I love when I'm speaking is when you can interact with the people that you're talking to, and they give you back that information where you know that, hey, this is a spot I need to hang out and talk a little bit longer, or this is a spot they're not really connecting with me, I need to move on to the next point. Because that interaction, that's where I know, yes, we're connecting, or no, we're not, and I need to keep working harder at this. And I think that that's the joy of actually speaking, to the group. Too. Yeah, when you actually make that connection.
And we say as writers, know your audience, know your avatar, who you're writing to all the time. And as speakers, that's just as important. Yeah. I'll ask those questions ahead of time of the organizer. I'll say, well, who's this group? Especially if I don't know, are they mostly women? Are they a mix? Are they older, younger? Are there going to kids be present? Because then there'll be a change. A lot of times I try to incorporate something for the kids. If it's a mother-daughter, mother-child spring tea or something like that, then you do something with the kids, and you're and then go early and meet several of them, because you're right, Vicki, that helps you connect. And you could casually say, well, Anita and I were talking before I started today, and I was aware of here at your church. And that's the other thing. Ask if something major has gone on to your church. Did they just have a major split over the minister? Did somebody, key person, 3 people were killed in a car accident or something like that? Sometimes you connect with them. It's a connecting point if you are aware of your audience. That's sort of it. I want to go back up and have something Tina added in the chat too when we were talking about selling books. She added to have the MC come and join you on the stage at the end and discuss the books available with you. So you can summarize what's about. I thought that was a great suggestion on that. It's almost 12, so I think we can invite everybody to come on back in, and we can do any more last minute questions or sharing.
Great. Oh my gosh, Vicki, those were fun.
Oh, Vicki, it's made it fun today. It's fun. What a fun thing. If you're trying to come on back in and you can't, put it in the chat.
No.
Get back in and we'll release you. Sometimes we've taken you off camera, and sometimes then that stops you from being able to come back in. So if you want to come back in and it won't come back on.
And Jeannie, you didn't have to mute once.
I know. Well, they're pounding out there. I don't know if you can hear them or not on that. So write in the chat, and then just to start, while I'm watching the chat to see if anybody can't come on back in, that wants to come on back in. Leslie had a question. She said about freebies. Do you use freebies with your audience or anything like that? What's some feedback on that? Anybody that want to come back in, can't come back in, put it in the chat, please.
I've never taken stuff. So I don't know. You could give them a book. I mean, that would be a good thing to do. You could have some kind of, like, who drove the furthest to get here kind of question or something like that, and give away a book if you wanted.
I also make sure there's a way to sign up, whether that's a text sign up or a list that they can sign up, and then make sure that I send them something via email. I know when I was doing the coloring pages, that was one of the freebies that I would make sure that somebody who got on the email list got. But that's a good way to collect your emails too, because you want to capitalize on those speaking events.
I've seen Jim Watkins do his Giant Slayer speech, and I'm trying to think, he may have done that at Blue Ridge. Did he do that at Blue Ridge? And he had stones out. Everybody gets a stone, and it becomes such a touch point. I still have my stone up here from Jim's talk that I saw him do, and I remember that talk, that point. For a simple story, he got stopped, and they checked his bag at TSA when he was getting on the airplane. I love that.
Oh my God.
But anyway, I just thought, isn't that just amazing? Just one little thing. And I always try to think that through in both my writing and speaking. What's the one quote, the sticky statement, the take home to give them? And is there an image? Sometimes that is a giveaway, that image to everybody. Sometimes it's just that word, or you tell them an image, you describe them that image. The straw will be an image of today's writer's chat.
Absolutely, I love it.
Yeah, it's that way. So that was something I wanted to. I had some other notes, but I'm just going to ignore them. We could add them. Maybe we can do this topic again sometime.
We will have to. Jeannie has a good question though in here about memorizing your speech ahead of time or just knowing notes. I'm sorry. Oh, so Vicki already answered. No, you're good. I thought, did I say the wrong person that asked the question? I have to have my intro pretty much memorized, because if I don't get into that first transition very well. And so I know what I'm going to start out saying, but then after that, I know the material well enough that I can ad lib and I can go off topic and come back, kind of like Vicki was saying about reading your audience and all of that. But I have to have those first words. I need to know what they're going to be.
My opening story, or that for some reason.
And that first transition to the main point. Otherwise, I get real
And I try to have the ending that way too, because you need a lot of eye contact to nail that ending. I think, however you want to do it, I try to do that. Go ahead.
Can I just clarify? I know that because of practicing. I don't know that because I went out and did not have my opening prepared and flubbed up in front of 100 people. It was because in practicing, it's like, man, I don't have that down yet. I don't have that down, and so that's kind of what I do. But I kind of do that with my writing too. It's like I go back and back and back until I get that first chapter, or those first 3 chapters solid. And it's kind of hard for me to move on until I know that they're like, yes, this is it. So
I give my best speeches and talks and debates and things like in the mirror when I'm getting ready, or
in the shower.
The shower is a great place.
That's when I'm thinking, I'm working through all those processes points, and so I don't necessarily have notes in front of me. And it's just information I know because I've either researched it or I've practiced it or it's something I've done. And so that information is all there. It's just how am I going to organize it? How am I going to, get it out there? How does it make sense to the audience? My best speeches are always in front of the mirror.
And it was just talking about flexibility though, just in something in the chat just made me think of this. I was asked to do like the main thing at a retreat. So I was going to be the first speaker, just kind of kick it off. And I thought they said 45 minutes. And they got to running late and decided I only had 30. Well, the time limit. So, I mean, I had practiced for 45 minutes. And I was kind of, like, oh, great. How do I cut 15 minutes out of this thing? But because I knew the material and because I had, I had it in my head, I did it. It worked. I mean, you just sort of, okay, I don't really need to say that. You just kind of, I don't really need to say that.
Always easier to cut than add.
Exactly right.
And I was able to ad lib a little bit in that too. I mean, I did talk about things I didn't even intend to talk about, and still it all came together. So yeah, you just have to go with the flow and go with friend. If you're starting out, go with friendly groups. Talk to your writers groups. Ask to talk to your women's groups. They can, can I give this presentation? Because they're your friends and your buddies, and they want you to succeed. And you just need those times of confidence where, yeah, I did it, and maybe you flubbed up, but they don't really care because they love you, and if they can learn from that. We learn failure is a mentor, as my father says.
That is. I do want to add a thing while we're still recording, then we'll probably see if anybody has one more last minute question. If not, we'll go off for the after party. But there is a podcast I've been listening to by Carol Cox, C-O-X, and it's called Speaking Your Brand podcast. She prepares people like for TED Talks. So it is rich, full of information about speaking. She had one on this morning interviewed a lady about how to dress for your speaking, dress to match your audience. Do you dress according to your brand? There was really some good practical tips. I enjoyed that podcast. She's got a great website that's called also Speaking Your Brand. I think it's a .com. But you might want to check out Carol Cox because I think you'll find some tips for speaking. I'm learning things from her, even though I've done a lot of speaking lately. Vicki?
I also have one. Roger Love is a speaking coach, singing coach. He worked with Brendan Burchard for a long time. He has a...
For those of you that don't know,
we've got new people here who may not know.
I know. No, well, it's rogerlove.com. He's got great tips. He has a blog. I mean, people hire him to coach them, actors and actresses and things like that. But he also has a blog where you can get a lot of free information.
Love.
Love, yeah, Roger Love.
Yep.
Okay.
We're asking requests in the chat to have those names put in the chat. So I'm going to let you guys do that. The people you're following, the podcast you're recommending. Great. Well, this has been very fun.
Next week, can I PR next week before we get off? I know it.
Oh, good.
Next week, Vicki will be back with us, as guys, with or without her straws. I don't know. And Bethany will be with us. Hopefully Bethany will return to us. We're going to talk about the platform Medium. This is one some people are on, some people aren't, and what we've learned and some tips and tricks on. It's another platform to try. I wouldn't call it social media. Would you call it social media? I don't know how I would classify it. We'll have to figure that out before next week.
So the name of the platform is
Medium. Just like you might have your steak, Medium. So it's an intro to using Medium is the title that we're going to have. And apparently Vicki and Bethany's used it, and I've experimented with it just enough that I know nothing. And we'll share that. I plan to take notes from the two of them next week. But Vicki, thank you again for joining us today.
Thank you.
It was fun.
Yeah, I'm really, really glad. And those of you that are here, stay on for a few minutes, and we'll have a little bit of an after party, which we can do some sharing. And Johnny, thank you this has been a great
you. It's fun.
About the writer as a speaker, and that sounds like we have enough material to redo this topic again someday.
It does, yeah.
So thank you for being with us. Bye, all.
Bye. Oh, I have to stop.
Yeah.